Diane and I had a chance to visit with the mayor and his family on Sunday in the hospital this past Sunday, and I talked to him. He wasn't so verbal then; he was alert, but I'd had a chance to talk to him several days before then. You know, it's a huge loss for the city of Boston. It's a loss for Diane and me, and you know, the way he governed and the way he lived his life, he was all about making friends. So he leaves not just a large and loving family, but a large number of and circle of loving friends who were devastated as well.
Governor, could you tell us about the man before we get into the politics in his 20 years at the city? The man.
Well, I got to know him probably best in the last decade or so. Actually, a pretty wonderful sense of humor. The reputation of being so focused on very personal needs of the people he served was earned. He saw people, all people. He was deeply concerned about the racial and ethnic healing of the city, about the city's reputation as a good place to raise a family and go to work and play. He was a clothes horse. He loved to shop, particularly with his grandkids. He was utterly devoted to his family, and the relationship between him and Angela was unshakable.
You had him as a political ally. You had a force, didn't you?
He was great. You know, he was. I remember going to see him, you know, when I was just getting going, and never having run for office before. I was told that part of what you do is go around and ask people for their support. And I went to see him, and he was warm, skeptical, like a lot of people, I think. But he said to me, I'll never do anything to hurt you. He was active with the favored candidate in that Democratic primary, and as soon as the primary was over, he was all in with us and a big help. He and his team.
Governor, you had mentioned that he gave you advice about him on Sunday. Just a couple months ago.
Actually, so he wasn't so verbal on Sunday, but a couple days before, when we spoke on the phone, he said, "Don't let the knuckleheads get you down." I'll leave aside what knuckleheads we were talking about at the time.
That's a phrase you've used from time to time, as I recall.
Maybe.
Is there a moment, an encounter, something that you'll remember most about him, either from your own interactions with him or just something he did while he was there?
Well, you know, there was nothing quite, for either of us, I think, quite like the aftermath of the marathon bombing. And you remember that I was with the mayor the morning of, that is. I went by the hospital and we visited some, and that is when he said, you know, I'm not going to be able to be at the marathon. Would you crown the men's winner, which is normally what is the tradition of the mayor? And I said, of course. And also kind of hard to believe that he wouldn't be at a Boston Marathon. And then, as you know, later that day, after the attacks, by the time of the second or third press avail, he had checked himself out of the hospital and was very much. I mean, he had been involved in the briefings by phone, but to have him present through that day and then through the ensuing days, and totally engaged in helping the city heal. And I frankly think that one doesn't wish illness or weakness on anyone, friend or foe. But to see this mayor lift himself out of his wheelchair at the memorial service was a very powerful image for me, and I think for a lot of people.
How would you characterize in that vein his leadership style?
Oh gosh, I mean, it doesn't. I mean, for me, it's a fair question, but it's impossible to reduce it to a word or two. You know, he was very personal about his leadership. He was very personal about the city. It was he understood after 20 years the ins and outs of the city, who was who the newcomers were, who the old timers were. He understood the neighborhoods and the differences in the characters of the neighborhoods, what they had been and what they were trying to become. And he understood that because he was with people and listening to people.
A lot of people describe him, or they thought him as indestructible.
So, I'm sorry, say it again.
Sorry. A lot of people described him as indestructible, unstoppable. So when the news came that he was stopping his cancer treatment, it took a lot of people by surprise.
Yeah.
Do you feel the same way?
I wouldn't describe it as surprise. I mean, I'd been in touch as I said, so it wasn't it didn't come entirely out of the blue. But he was a fighter, and he fought as long as he could, and as long as his family. I think that the decision, frankly, was a family decision. Was everybody, and the statement they put out was so classy and accurate in the sense that he was trying to spend his time with his family and loving them and having him love him back rather than continuing these treatments. I know he was also very, very grateful, and I'm sure the family is, for the exceptional care he got at the Brigham and at Dana-Farber.
Governor, what do you think the mayor would have wanted us all to take forward from his stewardship? What do you think he wanted us?
Well, you know, it's interesting. We had some conversation, my team and I, about what to do today. You know, and I have ordered the flags at state office buildings and at the State House, of course, lowered to half staff, and they will be there until the service, whenever that is over. But I'm going to do some campaigning today, and I'm going to do it in his honor. He'd want Democrats to win, and I know that from having talked with him. And he wants this slate to win, and so mindful of his contributions and sobered by this news, we're going to keep going, and I think keep going. Not just in his honor, but in that spirit of making it personal, of seeing everybody and worrying about everybody. It's the best kind of spirit of public service.
He never actually retired. He never really retired.
He never did, and you know, it's interesting. He's been out of office as mayor for less than a year, right? And so I guess on many levels, including that one, I'm thinking about Angela, who was just such an extraordinary partner, was so positive and at peace when we were with her and the family when Diane and I were there on Sunday, and she was, as I said, an extraordinary partner in his political and personal life, and I know she's going to miss him enormously, and I think it's incumbent on all of us to pay attention to her and make sure she doesn't feel that her own loss isn't compounded.